Welcome to Magnify Your Message. Inspiration magnified.
People have been there, but people don't do anything. They say they will give and then they don't.
So
So
we're going to try and change that. That's one of our projects.
that's a big project.
It is my honor to introduce you to the guests on today's Magnify Your Message podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with Myer and Jay Paris, who are not only people that I admire greatly, but people that I've become very close with over the years. A lot of people these days are complaining about the state of the world, but there are comparatively few who are actively making a difference to change the things that are not working, to have people be heard and seen and known and have their lives matter. Two people that are making this huge difference are Anna and Jay, and I cannot wait for you to experience this conversation with them. They founded a collective called beheard.world. They're Boston based, but they're making a national difference. Once you see them and listen to their amazing stories, both Anna starting out as a professional dancer, a choreographer, moving through her own tragedy and becoming an activist, to Jay starting out as a world-renowned photojournalist and then moving to his transition. You will be amazed at the paths that led them on their journey and what they've decided to do with it. When you listen to the interview, it's going to be no surprise why everyone from the New York Times and the Boston Globe is raving about the real life difference they make. Let me turn this over to them now so you can hear it directly from their mouths. Enjoy. You are going to be captivated and called forth by today's guests. I am honored and thrilled that you're here. Anna Myer, Jay Paris, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you for having us.
It's our pleasure.
Who are you? What do you provide in this world?
Well, shall I start? So we're part of an organization that we actually founded about 7 or 8 years ago called beheard.world or beheard.world. We're Boston based, and we are really a collective of about 15 artist activists, artist educators. And we include, that includes filmmakers and performing artists and those of us who work with young people around youth workshops in the arts. But we use the arts basically to forge important conversations and bring people together with a sense of belonging to heal and build community.
Extraordinary.
We're also very racially diverse, and that lends to some deeper conversations that we've had all together and continue to do that sort of bring us deeper into the subject of belonging and othering and racial issues and community and people coming together.
Your individual stories, not to mention who you are together and what you've created, the story behind beheard.world, are all really fascinating. Would you share those with us, starting with your individual stories and how you arrived here?
You start,
I don't know how far back you want me to go, but I sort of actually sort of interesting where I started and where I've ended up. When I was a very little girl, there were two dreams that I had, and one was to be a dancer and the other was to be marching in the front lines with Martin Luther King. And I was too young to do that, but I did become a dancer. And let's see, I got deeply into the ballet world, classical ballet world, and was a classical ballet dancer for many years. And in my mid-30s, I had a tragedy in my life where my stepson was African American, was murdered in New Haven. And it so dramatically changed my life that I started over, and I completely quit everything that I was doing and went up to New Hampshire and started waitressing, and then ended up in the fall sleeping on my brother's couch looking for a rent control apartment. And I started choreographing, and it was something that I never wanted to do. I never wanted to have a company, and before I knew it, I had a company and was loving choreographing, and it was my voice. And I grew up without a voice in my family, and this was a way for me to sort of grow up and through my choreography and to share, I don't know, share who I am. And I found myself actually quite good at getting people to, how to say, I guess, move people. And I love doing the work that I do. And in my, I guess it was 2007, I had sort of had enough of the, I call it the narcissistic art world, and wanted to make a difference. And I started giving poets, kids from Boston's inner city, a voice in my work with violins and dancers. And I got good reviews. It started working with more poets and rappers, and these kids got to go with me to Europe to perform. They got to go to New York City. Some of them had never been to New York City. And I guess about a year or two later, someone, a mutual friend of Jay and I, put us together into a room and said, you two should know each other. And Jay was doing some amazing work, which he'll talk about, in Franklin Field, which is a rough, very rough housing development in Boston, and wanted to bring art into the inner city. And we started working together. We fell in love, and we're still very in love. And we do a lot of work that we've grown our company, and it's mushroomed into a much larger organization than I ever expected. And I want to make a difference in the world. I have always wanted people to get along, even my family. And I've wanted the world to get along, and boy, are we in, we've had some troubled years recently. So the work I feel like we're doing is valuable, and I'm loving doing it.
What an extraordinary way to pay forward your stepson's legacy into what you do today. What an
Yeah,
extraordinary way to honor him.
yeah, it was life-changing, really. And if I could get anything out of that, it was to give back in some way. You know.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Jay, tell us your
Well,
story. Who are you?
Mine is less dramatic than Anna's, but I'll do my best to make it interesting. I came out of college very interested in this whole storytelling domain, and I was split. I couldn't decide whether I wanted to be a photojournalist or a writer. I love to write, but I didn't really think that I'd be good enough to be a writer. So I ended up in the magazine world as a photojournalist. And over time, I was traveling a lot. I was going all over the place, and often in conflicts, area of the world with conflicts in Africa, South Africa, Haiti. But I began, I began coming back, and, as I got to know editors better, I would say, well, this was a good story, but listen, there was a really interesting story that we probably should have gotten, you know? And finally, one of them said, well, basically put up or shut up, you know, if you want to do a story, why don't you try writing a story? And I was lucky enough to be mentored by a couple of people who were, you know, just great teachers and writers themselves. And so little by little, I transitioned into becoming a journalist as I got a little older. And I did work for some publications where I could do both. I did some work at National Geographic, and I did a lot of work with Time Life. But in the end of the day, I got to a point in my life where I just needed to switch up. I think I was in my early 40s, and I thought, you know, I've been on the road so much, and I've seen a lot of stuff, and I, you know, I'm empathic by nature, and you know, I think it was beginning to get to me because I'd seen so much hardship, and I kept thinking, you know, there's got to be some other ways that I can make a difference. So I decided to take a break from all that. And an old friend had started a nonprofit in the Boston area who was developing programs for kids and families. And he said, you know, I've got a problem at this one place that I want you to check out. How about if you just go down as a consultant, tell me what you think it needs? And I went down and I said, I think the real problem is you just don't have the right leadership. So he said, well, how would you like to run it? Well, I didn't really know what I was doing. I jumped into this thing. It was really wildly crazy. I mean, it was like, you know, 18-hour days for a year. But I got a fast lesson in what the social services world was all about, and just beginning to think maybe I could make a difference. But I was very interested in what would happen when particularly these kids living in very difficult circumstances and a lot of poverty and high crime neighborhoods got a chance to use their voices, find their voices and use them and express themselves. And again, you know, I'd had a whole career and interest in storytelling. So I began wanting to explore that. And I developed this program called the Youth and Police Initiative, which brought cops and kids together from neighborhoods that were under duress. And it was a 5-day workshop, after-school workshop. It was all based on the kids preparing stories that they could share about themselves with the officers. And then once they did that, sort of putting the officers on the spot because they wouldn't know this was coming, and say, hey, the kids took a lot of, they very courageously shared themselves to the very people who they're most, who they see as their adversaries. How about if you share something of yourselves? How did you become a cop? How did you go from them to being an officer? And they would tell these stories, and the kids would be on the edge of their seat, and they'd realize that all of the myths that they had about cops and the cops had myths about these kids were all breaking down very quickly in this 2.5-hour session. And from that, they could build a whole new set of relationships. And so that was what I was doing in this housing development, and that was beginning to catch on around the city and eventually even further. But
around the country.
But and just the way these kids were responding to the opportunity to do that, I thought, I got to take this to another level. And then this friend of ours who knew what I was doing and knew what Anna was doing said, you guys are aligned. And I didn't know much about dance. In fact, I was that kid in the junior high school mixer who would press up against the wall as hard as I could when the fast music started, a little heavy on the heels, all that stuff. But then Anna, came into the room, and we just were able to get creative together very quickly, and it just started clicking. Ideas, where we could get some money to try these things. The kids were responding amazingly, and then of course, I was exposed to the world of dance because the company that Anna had started was doing really, really high level work that was being praised by the New York Times and the Boston Globe and the Boston Phoenix and all these excellent newspapers. And so and this is sort of a very personal part of it, but had been a long time since I've been around someone who was so purely an artist, living, breathing, sleeping, talking, her art, what she cared about. And just to be around somebody like that sort of brought back all of um, my leanings, my creative leanings and who I really was, because that is kind of at the heart of who I am. But, I've had all these other layers of bureaucratic things and organizing and so forth. And so when we created these opportunities together, we started to realize that there was a way that we could do more than just this for these kids, that we could create different kinds of pieces. And I got very interested in making documentary films, which is sort of a natural step, given that I'd done writing and photography, with great encouragement from Anna. And the stuff that I wanted to film, the documentaries, were very much aligned to what Anna was doing on stage. And so it was just sort of this natural flowing. We thought, is there a way we could combine all that? And because we were white and working often in minority communities, we were very interested in making, getting the involvement in voices and opinions and thoughts and creativity of the communities where we were operating. So like today, out of our 15, actually, I think we're up to a little higher than 15 in our group now. I think we're closer to 18, but the majority are Black or brown, and the age range is, I'm the oldest by a good bit, but as young as 22. And we're just very aligned and committed to this mission of how can we use the arts to really impact communities, remind people of who we are, how much we have in common, not what our differences, and how we can be and come together and celebrate that.
It's not surprising at all that those around you knew that you had to meet. It feels as though, as you're telling the stories, that it was destined to happen.
It was funny too, because the second, I don't know, maybe the third time we actually physically gotten together, felt like the second maybe. We were, Jay was driving, I was in the car, and I just said, he was gonna drop me off. I said, could you just pull over for a minute? And because I said, I'm not finished talking to you. And we spent 4 hours talking to each other about taking these performances on basketball courts and how we could bring our art into neighborhoods and our films into neighborhoods. And it just, I mean, I knew, I don't know. It was very weird. It was just meant to be,
Now, wait, I have to ask, you knew that Be Heard World was meant to be? You
I
knew
knew that I
two
was,
of
I don't
you?
know, there was something about, I knew I was
I think we
meant to be with him.
knew that we were supposed to partner together creatively, and as it turns out, romantically. But
It just,
creatively,
there
for
was
sure.
just like, I don't know. And I would say, I had been in therapy for a number of years before I met Jay. It's one of the reasons why I think I met him was I learned about flow and attracting people to me, different people to myself. And it was definitely flow. And I used to say to my therapist all the time, it takes one person to change your life. And I kept saying that, and here's this one person who's totally changed my life. Yeah, it's really not. He's my best friend, really, and it's great. We work together really well. It's lovely, really. So I feel very lucky.
What a blessing for the two of you, for the people to whom you contribute, those members of Be Heard World, all those that you serve. What are some of the projects that Be Heard World does that you want to share with us?
Well, I have to tell her this story because
Please.
I mean, this is about flow, but Jay and I and one of our dancers were down in Montgomery, Alabama for a conference. It was a teachers' conference about, I guess, mostly about the issue of race, but and we went down to Selma because we wanted to go. I wanted to see Selma. And because it has such a unbelievable history, you know, marching over that bridge was the right for Black people in this country to vote. And what happened in that city was pretty tough. So anyway, we got there and we took one look at Selma, and I was like, oh my God, this place is, I mean, there's a lot of poverty. This is really, I mean, this is a monument in this country. And I said, Jay, you know, we should do something here. Anyway, we get back to Boston, and Jay turns to me a couple days later and says, hey, Anna, there's this article in the Boston Globe about Selma. And I start reading. I mean, it was really, you know, it was strange, you know.
Yes.
And we started reading the article, and there's this man named Charles Bonner. Charles Bonner is a civil rights lawyer in San Francisco, and he's kind of an amazing person, but he was all through the article and about Selma and about what he wants to do there and make change. And I said, oh, Jay, let's just call him up. I said, I know he'll never call us back. 2 weeks later, we get a phone call back from him. And while we're on the phone with him, you know, we've all of a sudden decided that we're all going to work together. We're starting a nonprofit in Selma. And it just started happening. And not only that, but this is what's so funny about where we are now. But my dreams about when I was a kid about wanting, you know, I'm a Libra, so I'm really into social justice. I love the scales and balance, and yeah, this whole thing, racial thing that's been going on in this country for years has been such a passion. And we were sitting in Selma. Jay is making a documentary film about Selma, but also what we're doing there with teenage kids. We're doing a whole an arts initiative. We're actually starting an arts center there, a nonviolence and arts center in Selma. But while we're filming people, Jay's like interviewing all these people, and across the table from us, we're interviewing this man called Bernard Lafayette. And Bernard Lafayette, at the age of 22, you know, SNCC was the Students Nonviolent Coordinating Council, and they go around to different cities in the Black Belt and teach nonviolence to make change down in the 60s, early 60s. And on the SNCC headquarters, there was a map with Selma on it, and there was an X crossed out, and there was all these other places you could go. He said, Bernard Lafayette said, why is that crossed out? He said, because the white people were too vicious and the Black people were too frightened, and nobody's going there. And Bernard said, I'm going. And Bernard shows up at Selma, and who's pushing his car down the street but Charles Bonner, because he ran out of gas. And Bernard runs right into Charles and says, let me help you push. And they started a conversation, and that conversation grew into hundreds of teenagers in bottom of churches being taught nonviolence and demonstrating and getting that march over that bridge to happen. And Bernard Lafayette also became Martin Luther King's chief of staff. And the day Martin Luther King was shot, 2 hours before he was shot, Bernard was in his hotel room. And Bernard was leaving the hotel room, and Martin Luther King says to him, I want you to carry on my nonviolence training. And Bernard has been doing it his whole life. And he never saw him again.
Wow.
And I just go, I just looked at these two men and I said, I cannot believe I'm sitting across the table from you people, and that you're still doing this work and you're still fighting to fight. I mean, it's really chilling. So, you know,
What a fulfillment of your childhood vision for your life.
you know, I just said, this is, you know, here you are, you know, and to help make change. And so we've been going down there last year, the whole residency we did with these kids, and then they came up to Boston and performed, and we took them to New York City, we took them to Washington, D.C. So, you know, Jay's making this whole film about, well, you could talk about that film a little bit, maybe.
Well, you know, these civil rights veterans are, you know, aging out. A lot of them are already gone. And so getting their voices and telling the real story of Selma, because people, I think, have this sense that, and Martin Luther King, of course, was doing amazing things leading up to it and came in after the march that was the bloody march that's so famous. But it was the kids who created that, insisted on it. And actually, MLK and the SNCC people said, don't march, we're not going to march, it's too dangerous. And they said, we're doing it. And so then SNCC, in particular, SNCC leader said,
John Lewis,
John Lewis, came in and said, well, I'm not going to let these kids go over the bridge alone, so we'll lead. But that's not a very well-known story. So between that and now these kids who are now in this very impoverished town, that was such an important place in the history of civil rights, are now coming the new voice, of Selma, just as the kids back then were. We think we'll make a pretty interesting film. So that's what we're doing.
What is the phrase? And a child shall lead them, right? The children now.
Yeah, it's true.
And parallel against the children then. Wow.
Yeah.
And these kids still really, I mean, I don't know, this is a tough one because, I mean, we sat in their congresswoman's office she was going to give them 20, her name is Terry Sewell. And we were in DC and they were going to give us 20 minutes in her office. She gave us an hour and a half.
Mm.
And the kids did their poetry, but they also talked about too what they wanted in Selma. There is nothing for these kids, nothing. Everything is gone. The poverty is, it's just really, so, how to give them a voice and what, how that matters, to have a voice. And
I was so proud of these kids because, these are kids who were, never, a lot of them had never been on a plane. They'd never seen a big city. They'd never seen the ocean. They'd never done spoken word. And, and then we'd work with them for 3 weeks and we performed down there and we brought them up. And here they were in their congresswoman's office, in the halls of the Capitol, and
doing poetry,
advocating for what Selma needs and doing this beautiful poetry, which, fortunately we have all this on film, but it was so moving.
And she was really generous, just to give us that time. All the people in their office kept coming in saying, you got to go, you got to go, you got to go. And she kept pushing them away. And so, it's important that Selma, I think, has some attention paid to it. This is such an important part of our country, really.
You phrased it so perfectly. It is a monument.
Monument. It's just, I was shocked. People, every year on the Jubilee, be marching over that bridge. 40,000 people flood into Selma and march over that bridge. And it's quite a scene. It's quite a happening. And then they're gone. And, and people come to speak. We saw President Biden one year. We saw,
That's right, that last one.
yeah, and, people have been there, but people don't do anything. They say they will give and then they don't.
So we're going to try and change that. That's one of our projects.
That's a big project.
What other projects do you want to share with us?
We made a piece called Belonging and Othering, apropos of, course, our mission. And what we did is we went out and found 7 diverse people who had the experience of being othered. Now, we've all been othered. By that, I mean excluded, kept away from, not included, not getting a sense of belonging. They each had their own story. There was a Black man, there was a Jewish man, there was a transgender man,
gay,
there was an Asian American woman, right? There was a gay man, and actually there was Anna, who was sort of representing a white woman, But anyway, took him into the studio, really filmed him, high value filming, lit, all that stuff. And then Anna had dancers do a solo to each story as we projected them on this giant 20 by 30-foot screen behind the dancers. And then when the filming, when the stories were done, which was 20 minutes later, the dancers came out and together did a piece around.
Well, I choreographed it for the second half.
The line, which Anna put together.
Well, you get to use their material from the solos to create a group section, what it looked like to belong. And we had a local Boston composer made an exceptionally beautiful piece for it. And at the end of the piece, each slowly, one by one, each dancer ends up in the audience. And so there's nobody on the stage left. And we're all sitting together, which was very sweet. I mean, people.
Now, you know, at the end of all of our performances, or whenever we can, our film showings, we try to have a, you know, forge a really in-depth discussion, half hour to an hour, even an hour and a half, it's gone as long as, to really get people to talk about how it might have changed their perspective or what they're feeling or thinking. And we've done that piece, what, 3 times now, because it's the most recent thing. And the audiences were really, really blown away. So now we're thinking, okay, it's time to figure out how to get this, you know, out into the world in a bigger way. So that's,
There's spoken word that starts it and spoken word in between the solos and the group section and spoken word at the end. It talks about belonging and othering.
and you know, not to tie it all back to Magnify Your Message, but I think we should talk about this because, and I, you know, as I look at over your shoulder, Magnify Your
I
Message,
see it.
you know, we had the distinct opportunity, pleasure of going into the taking the Magnify Your Message course, and then from that, sort of going into the advanced course called Icon Alliance, which Cheryl, you also led, of course, and really, really helped us sharpen our understanding of how the media works, how we could sharpen our message and tell our story in a way that would allow the media to do stories about us. And I have to say, for us, because we're service oriented, one of the things that I think was so important for us is that we really, really had to get clear to be able to do that, just to really, have a message that would get the attention of a very busy and demanding media. We really had to dig down, and there's a skill set part of it. But one of the beautiful things about the experience, Cheryl, was that, and getting to do this with others like ourselves in this group was, it wasn't just enough to be good. Sorting out your message and saying it. I really think you had us doing the deeper work of who are you? What do you represent? What is, what's really at the heart of why you're doing this? Why is it important? For us, that was very, very powerful. And I think that will reveal itself. I mean, I think because we're not professional presenters, but I think we got good enough and real enough. And I guess that's the word, I want to say, is that real enough about our message and who we are. But sometimes, it's not just a matter of being good. It's a matter of people getting this sense of, wow, these people are coming from a very, very important place for them and maybe for us. And so we were able to, we've been able to get some great coverage, I think. And I attribute a lot of that to getting it. And it's not easy. I mean, it's some work. So, we had to, you got to be willing to do it. But if you do, I think the payoff, especially at the level I'm talking about, the payoff is big. Okay.
Thank you. Renown and gaining attention is more challenging now, I think, than it's ever been. It's there with everyone on the planet quite literally having access to a microphone now, courtesy of social media. And there's a challenge that you inadvertently or unwittingly added to the mix, which was it's not only trying to get the eye of the world, the eyes and ears of the world, but rather not to get it for yourselves, but for your mission, which is a whole thing in and of itself that adds another level of complexity. Individuals today become famous, and in a weird paradoxical way, there's two ends of the extremes. If you imagine 180 degrees apart, there are those who become famous for nothing. I don't mean to be pejorative. Some of them, do cool makeup tutorials or something like this, or show fashion, and some people might love finding these things, but become famous then for being famous, or famous for being attractive, or famous for something along those lines. And then there are people like you who are trying to command the spotlight of renown to shine on something that will profoundly impact the quality of life for those you serve. And particularly because the two of you wanted to sometimes almost duck out of the spotlight. No, it's about the people, the other people at Be Heard World. It's about the people that we serve. It's about the mission. You made it more challenging for yourself, but I think ultimately more rewarding, because when the attention and the accolades have started to come toward you, you've allowed them to then shine upon the amazing work that you do.
It's funny you say that, because I mean, just also, the DEI work seems to be getting sort of some bad press, and people saying that DEI doesn't work, and that it's a waste of time. And I could say I could disagree, but only in the sense that you need to go to people's core, and you need to go to people's hearts, and you need to get people to feel. And only then will people share, be vulnerable and emotional, and
Expand their perspective.
And perhaps change. DEI stuff can go to the head. It's a concept, and people tend to get defensive and pull back. And I think, I mean, I don't know, I feel like now here is a really, really good time with all this politics going on, that we need to start feeling, and we need to start sharing, and we need to talk about all those, to be vulnerable, and all those important things that we seem to have lost some along the way here.
Diversity, just one quick moment, Jade. Diversity, equity, and inclusion from the perspective of something that is mandated and foisted upon you will never move the needle. It is only the work, the type of work that you're doing that touches hearts and opens hearts and changes perspectives, that can ever actually alter what's there for people. Excuse me.
Well, I was just going to add, Cheryl, to, one of the things that you taught us is that a very effective way to get the attention of a producer, or, somebody in the media who's looking for stories, is to bust a myth. And, this is something that we really went right to after Icon Alliance, which is, the DEI world was getting all this bad press, and we are saying, well, wait, DEI taught as a group of concepts, as words you have to learn and understand, and is one thing, but there's another way to do it when it really can be very effective. And that's what we do. We offer that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Awesome.
Mm.
It is just, it is an idea whose time has come. I mean, let's face it, the time was long ago, and you're finding a way to make it, to cause lasting change, to cause real change, to alter the hearts and minds of each of us, to tap into the unconscious biases and shift us so we can all be who we're born to be. And it just comes back to you fulfilling this childhood dream, and everyone ought to have that ability and right, that birthright to fulfill that which they were
Yeah.
born to fulfill.
True.
Yeah, it's an interesting time where we are in right now.
It is such an honor to have this conversation with you both today.
Thank you so much. For
Yeah, we
having
really
us. And,
appreciate this.
gosh, Cheryl, we've known each other for a while now. I didn't know I forget when we first started. It's been a few years now, but it seems like we've come such a long way. And many thanks to you for your help.
It is a true privilege. It is to play any part in the profound difference making that you're doing is a privilege of a lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
appreciate it.
How can people learn more about you?
Well, I think coming to our website is a good place to start. And through the website, people can get directly hooked up to us. And it's really very simple. It's www.beheard, instead of .com or .org, it's .world. So it's beheard as I have been heard, beheard.world, one word, beheard. So it's really that simple. We'd love people to come check it out and reach out to us if, with questions or ideas, or like us to come to your community and think about ways we could support equality and justice and coming together. We'd love to do it.
I'll make sure that your information is included in the liner notes of the episode.
Awesome.
What
Great.
would you like to leave people with today?
Hmm.
I'll just start and
Yeah,
say
go ahead.
I think in this time of great division, it's almost seems like being divided and being adversarial is almost an American virtue, and I think sometimes we forget that we're all hardwired to belong and be in community, and our mission is just really to do that, to bring people together to do that, and we'd love to, if there are others out there who are sharing that mission and are doing similar kinds of work, we're always interested in collaborating. And again, coming to communities to see how we can help.
Well said. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cheryl. Really appreciate
It's
it.
great to see you.
Our very best.
I hope you enjoyed and found as much value and impact by my conversation with Jay and Anna as I did. Tune in next week for another amazing episode with a person who's a disruptor in their industry and doing amazing things with their message. In the meantime, would you please do me a favor and go to Apple Podcasts and write a written review? These reviews help people find us. And I would be super appreciative, as would all of my guests, if you helped us direct more listeners to find us. Thank you for being here. Have your own message make a difference. Until next time. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with everyone that you feel it would benefit. Thank you in advance. And when you're ready to share your story and your work with the world, I can help. Visit CherylHunter.com to learn how. I am Cheryl Hunter, and until next time, know that your message has the power to change the world.